What's your big takeaway, not so much for the estimates and the trading of the stock, but for how the business materially changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think they continue to be in this transition to the cloud and mobile. It was what I view as a honeymoon year for Nadella, and now you're starting to see some of the transition on the consumer as well as the commercial business. I mean, cloud continues to be a pillar of strength, but they're heavily tied to the PC environment, and we're starting to see that little renaissance of growth that we saw over the last 3-4 quarters starting to wane. So I think relative to other large cap tech players like IBM, SAP, EMC, Microsoft continues to be a bright star, which is standing out relative to a lot of these other slow growth tech stalwarts, traditional IT companies.
A bright star from the gloomy skies of the Seattle Northwest. I wonder, how much of this growth was baked in, sort of to set up whoever was going to replace Steve Ballmer in a brighter glow, if you will.
I think part of it is that Nadella did take over at a good time, right? I think that the seeds of growth were there. I mean, he was the cloud guy. I mean, the product cycle was underway. But I think part of why the stock's done so well over the last year is that you started to see that product transition. You started to see the move to the cloud. They made some of those tough cuts. And a lot of it's based on Windows 10. I mean, Windows 10 really is the bridge for them to be successful as they move to the cloud on the consumer as well as the enterprise.
What do we make of the Surface? Is it real? Does it matter now? I hate the journalism that starts with, I never see him, it must not exist. But every time I bring up the Surface with any of my colleagues, that's what they say.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this last Surface Pro 3, they've done a much better job in terms of the quasi-laptop replacement. I think brand awareness has been really strong with the NFL and the Russell Wilson ads. But part of it at this point for Microsoft, look, it's an uphill battle. I mean, they continue to struggle on tablets, struggle on mobile, but they need to up their share there, and they need to find areas of success because Windows 10, you can talk about holographics and everything else. It comes down to the consumer success that should bleed over from the enterprise. That's part of the whole vision for Nadella, and that's really one of the keys to Microsoft being successful over the next 3 to 5 years, that they have to change the perception as well as the product portfolio from the consumer perspective. No one's going to argue where they are in the enterprise. So I think there's a window of opportunity here. We saw the disappointment with Windows 8. And that they need to be successful with Windows 10. And I think you could see a bit of a transition as some of this commercial revenue gets pushed out in anticipation of Windows 10 later this year.
Stay with us. I want to also bring in Forrester's J.P. Gownder, an analyst there at Forrester. J.P., what do you think was the best thing about this quarter for Microsoft?
The highlights were definitely in areas like cloud, commercial cloud going up 114%, consumer cloud also growing, and perhaps Surface and Lumia sales. Surface is a small product, but it went up 24%, went over $1 billion, and over 10 million Lumias were sold. All of these were relative high points compared to what Nadella was trying to achieve.
All right, so if that's the best thing, what was the worst thing?
The Windows OEM revenue dropping 13%, although it was known that there was a seasonality effect here with the end of life of XP, it's still a concerning sign. With Windows 10 on the horizon, I think your previous guest said very clearly, Windows 10 is critical and its success is critical, but in that intervening period, people will still want to see performance out of Windows.
I was also noticed, Daniel, that the sort of sales to existing cloud clients were actually, it looked like they were down.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is they're a victim of their own success here, right? I mean, they're going through this transition. Look, cloud overall is still a small piece of overall revenue. I mean, it comes down to that's been very successful, but in order for that to really get taken to the next level, a lot of it's dependent on the Windows 10 upgrade cycle, and then a lot of it's also dependent on what we're going to see out of PCs, in terms of this headwind that's forming and currency and some of the softness that they talked about with China and Japan on the conference call. So they're going to be going through a transition, but I ultimately believe when they come through it, it's going to be the Microsoft that's not your grandpa's Microsoft. It's going to be one that, with Windows 10, much more cloud focus, much less focus on the PC, that will start to have success in the consumer. And I think part of that also is they need to be aggressive on M&A. I mean, they have more cash in some countries, and they need to start to utilize that. They talked about accelerating the buyback program in conjunction with the earnings call, but I think they need to be aggressive on M&A, on cybersecurity, as well as cloud.